I've pretty much since Apple II's existed been interested in playing games. So since I was a kid, I've known that either I wanted to run a candy factory because Willy Wonka was my favorite movie growing up, or run a game shop. So that was sort of the inception of the idea. I had no idea that this was all going to turn into Blizzard. I just thought making games would be fun, and managed to talk a couple of cool guys in college into coming on board, and here, we are 20 years later.
I met Alan, actually, my last year at UCLA. I noticed that there was this guy in both of my classes, and there was one day Alan and I both showed up early to the computer architecture class, and I saw him, and I thought I'd be really smart because I thought he looked Israeli. I said, "So, where in Israel are you from?" And he looked at me kind of puzzled. He said, "What?" I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm from Egypt."
I don't remember that, but that's the one Mike tells. The one I remember is we were sitting side by side at UCLA in one of the computer labs, and I had gotten up to go get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, and I had locked my computer system. And when I came back, I sat down, I typed in my password, the system unlocked, and I kept working. And this guy sitting next to me, who I didn't know was Mike, turned to me and he said, "Hey, how'd you do that?" And I said, "Do what?" He said, "While you were gone, your system unlocked itself and I relocked it using my password." And so it turned out, and what are the chances, Mike and I were both using the same password to lock our computer systems. He graduated slightly before me, about 3 months, maybe 6 months, but he kind of knew what the plan was, and he was down here in Irvine working at Western Digital.
He got it in his head that I should quit my job at Western Digital and go into business with him making games.
Much to the chagrin of his parents, his father in particular thought it was crazy to leave a good job for this crazy startup with a 22-year-old kid, but I think his dad knows he made the right decision now.
I borrowed $15,000 from my grandmother. $10,000 went into the company, $5,000 went into my bank account, and that's pretty much what I lived off of for the next 2 years.
Frank is a similar story. We were also both in the computer science department.
I attended UCLA to study computer science and engineering, and while I was there, I was fortunate enough to meet Alan Adham through a mutual acquaintance.
We had an AI class together, artificial intelligence, and it was so boring. It was so boring that I used to ditch all the time, and I'd go to Ackerman Union at UCLA and play video games. I would always see the same guy there. He had the same AI class. I think we saw each other like the first day and maybe on test days, and that was about it because we were both always ditching and playing video games.
When I was growing up, I always felt like I wanted to make computer games, but I really had no idea how to go about doing it. Alan also knew that he wanted to make computer games, but he knew exactly how he wanted to go about doing it. And right after Alan graduated, we happened to chat on the phone, and he said, "Frank, I want to talk to you about what I'm doing next. I want you to be a part of it." And he invited me to come make computer games with him. I left my job at Rockwell, and I came to work with Alan, and that was actually the first time I met Mike Morheim. Was the first day.
We built desks together. That was our first day.
It was a very small space, about 600 square feet, and right out the gate we started working on ports of Amiga and Mac titles, which was actually really great exposure for us because having never authored code for a computer game before, this gave us a huge code base to look at.
There was this attitude that it didn't matter what our project was, we were going to learn how to do it, and we could learn anything that we set our minds to. Initially, we were called Silicon and Synapse.
Silicon, the building block of the computer, and Synapse, the building block of the human mind.
Computers, brains, creativity, technology, nobody got it.
What we actually got over the phone was, silicone, isn't that what you put in women's breast implants? And what the hell is a synapse?
You know, when we first started, we just had this idea that we were looking for smart, passionate people who loved games, loved learning about game development. We just wanted to make great games. It was really as simple as that.
Our biggest criteria was we wanted kind of cool people who we thought would vibe with the company who played video games, and that applied to everybody.
I think that sort of the pre-Warcraft Orcs and Humans era of Blizzard really allowed us to grow the talent pool at the company.
We hired our first 3D artist. His name was Joey Ray Hall.
Our early hires in the art group were like, I think Sam came in, Sam Wise.
I saw an ad in a newspaper. It said, make art for video games. And that was all it said, really descriptive. I think a programmer wrote it.
Computer programming, we just wanted guys who were really into games and really into computer coding. Bob came in, he was obviously a D&D geek and an excellent programmer.
I walk in my I Love Toxic Waste t-shirt with a Tasmanian devil on the front, shorts and a t-shirt, sandals, and apparently it struck a chord with the three guys there.
So I came in for the interview, and the first thing I saw was this cute little receptionist named Frank Pierce.
At the time, they had me answering the phones. And honestly, I don't think I'm the best person to be answering the phones because I don't always have the most pleasant personality.
He opened up his mouth and said, "Yeah, can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm here to see Alan Atham." And he said, "Well, Alan's on a meeting. Can you go talk to Mike?" And so I met with Mike. I had my portfolio of art, which basically consisted of every single piece of art I had framed on the wall. I just threw into a big case, brought it in. And after that, he showed it to Alan, and they offered me the job there.
They hired me to work on Rock and Roll Racing. Written for the Super Nintendo. It was a new version of RPM racing that the company had done as one of their first startup games.
And we were, I think, the first American developer to develop and release a title for the Super Famicom. And we did it, we literally were using untranslated Japanese documents.
Rock and Roll Racing? I didn't work on that.
When I started, it was just sort of a normal racing game, and very much just a evolution of the RPM racing we had been doing.
It was also kind of funny because we knew that race car games should have cool driving music. And before Rock and Roll Racing, nobody had really used rock music at all.
So I programmed Rock and Roll Racing using assembly language for a 6502 processor. Heme, heme, heme.
We added spaceships and space aliens and all sorts of laser car sort of stuff, and we just kind of evolved it into a little bit cooler style of a game. Again, some of the Blizzard influence developing there, where instead of doing the normal cars, we made rocket cars with lasers and guns and that kind of stuff.
And that, plus the fact that it was an excellent game, Rock and Roll Racing took Racing Game of the Year that year.
So the first SNES title that I worked on in earnest was Lost Vikings, and we had almost everyone in the office working on that project.
When I started on Lost Vikings, there were about 100 Vikings you could control. Some that would raise up ladders, someone that would throw torches, all that sort of thing. It was very PC game oriented.
We were sort of inspired by Lemmings, the little PC game where you had a ton of little guys and they would just kind of walk around the screen.
And so we decided to make it a little bit more friendly for the Super Nintendo, and we dropped it down to 5 characters, then to 4, then to 3.
But it also had a lot of puzzles and a lot of level design and a lot more creative stuff that we were putting into it than we had needed to, I would say, previously.
For Lost Vikings, I was responsible for doing all the layouts for all of the puzzles and all the levels within Lost Vikings. We used a program called CED that Mike Morheim had written for this purpose to lay things out.
CED, the cell editor. This was my first project at Blizzard. It was a C++ project written completely in Zortex C++, and learned how to program in C++.
It was also the first forerunner for the map editor that would later become part of StarCraft and Warcraft and our games moving forward.
That's kind of our first move of taking sort of PC-style artwork and bringing it more into the Blizzard art style, where it's a little bit more cartoony, it's a little bit more accessible to the console market.
It went on to win Puzzle Game of the Year in the same year that Rock and Roll Racing won Racing Game of the Year. And so our tiny little company with about 20 employees won 2, I think, of the top 7 awards that year. Keeping in mind, we were competing against companies like Sega and Nintendo and Konami and Capcom. I think we may have been the only company to win 2 of the 7 top awards.
I was the lead programming guy on Blackthorn, which was one of the few games that we've done over the years that didn't actually have a multiplayer component to it.
It was inspired by a couple of cool games that at the time we thought were really fun, kind of blends between, you know, puzzle games and shooters.
Blackthorn was actually our first rotoscope game. We actually took Frank Pierce out in the back alley and got him to jump over a bunch of wood and got him to run and climb ladders and things like that, and we'd videotape him. Then we'd come back in and we'd draw over him for the character.
It was a little bit dry and a little bit boring, so we ended up making it on some far-off planet, and for some reason this guy with the dirty t-shirt and jeans is a prince, and like all princes, they have shotguns.
It was a pretty quick development. I don't remember it taking very long.
When I think back on Blackthorn, the funny thing I think about it is that the 2 artists that were primarily responsible for creating the character art for Blackthorn both had long, stringy hair. And if you look at all the character art in Blackthorn, including the main character, they've got this long, stringy hair. And it's like, wow, these artists basically created this character art in their own image. And so I think we need more diversity among our artists working on any one project so that we get diversity in that character art.
I guess the other funny story to go along with that was we had to change the name in Europe from Blackthorn to Black Hawk. Blackthorn turns out to be a really popular brand of beer in Europe. So it'd be like, I guess, if we had named our product Budweiser.
In the early years, the company pretty much lived on royalties that we got from the games we worked on or the ports that we worked on. But there were times when there just wasn't enough money to pay salaries and stuff like that.
On paper, it always looked like we were just a couple months away from being completely in the black and having a windfall of excess cash to work with. And it never really happened.
Mike and I tried to, you know, shelter everybody from anything other than making the games.
We found out that you could actually get interest-free advances on your Discovery card by going to the supermarket and getting cash back.
They would go and they would cash in their credit cards at the local market and then put the money in the bank account so that they could still make payroll.
And although we never missed the payroll, it's really a miracle that we never missed the payroll because we were always a week away from being unable to make payroll.
And some people knew about this and some people didn't. But those of us that did, we know the kind of people these men are, and we knew then that we would work for these people forever.
And so it was a pretty lean couple of years early on, but amazingly still super, super fun.
The company sort of grew beyond the point where our Discover cards couldn't handle it anymore. So we each went to our parents and we got them to put each $20,000 into a bank account, so $40,000. And at the time that we sold the company to Davidson and Associates, we completely maxed out the $40,000 credit line. And so, yeah, I mean, it was pretty tight for the first few years.
So that was a period where we were transitioning from being a third-party developer where we would make products for other companies based on their ideas. The next step up was being sort of a joint developer where we would take our own concepts and pitch them like Lost Vikings. And then we decided we wanted to try self-publishing, and we had started with Warcraft. The idea there was that it would still be published by an established publisher who had distribution, but we would control the packaging, we would sort of control the marketing, and our name would go on the front of the box. In the middle of that process, Bob and Jan Davidson came along.
We became aware of Silicon and Synapse because we had a product called KidWorks, which needed to be transformed into Windows. And they took on the project, they did it on budget, on time.
I heard about Silicon and Synapse when I started at Davidson